try to understand what you want to prioritize, what's going to be highest value within your organization, within your teams, and really focusing on that. Because if you chase everything, you're going to finish nothing. So just really get clear and focused in on what your main kind of areas that you think you should focus in on, and get feedback on that. Engage the teams on what are the most important things to the teams to be able to move the dial, right? Who best to ask about how can we engage and the people that you're trying to engage. So I would do that and kind of focus in on the important parts that are going to have most value to your teams and ultimately the organisation. So I try to focus in on highest value.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Freedom of Work podcast brought to you by RemoFirst. So today we're diving into a topic that's very, very critical for every HR leader out there, and it's how you truly engage your teams in meaningful ways so they do feel appreciated at their work. We're talking about recognition, feedback, and engagement, and why these elements are important. And today I'm joined by Mike. So Mike, would you like to tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you do?
My name is Mike, People Operations Manager at iVendi. I've been here for 6 years now. My background previous was very much in the recruitment world, if you like. And we've been doing lots of work over the past couple of years, specifically around employee engagement and coaching and mentoring, L&D, that kind of stuff. So we've had a real kind of focus on it over the past couple of years, really. So we've been on a bit of a journey that we've kind of discussed around employee engagement. So happy to share what we've done so far, challenges we've seen, and it's an all approach.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks so much, Mike, for joining us today. So I guess we'll just get straight into it. What does employee engagement look like for you and also maybe for iVendi?
It was always something that we were quite conscious of, it not just being, a couple of initiatives and we're doing them for doing them sake because other people are doing them. So we wanted to make sure that it was about, first and foremost, and it might sound kind of a bit obvious, but engaging first rather than coming up with the initiatives to then engage. So they're all kind of people-led, and by people I mean a cross-section of people throughout the company, not just by the people ops and kind of HR function. And we've done that through our kind of feedback forum, really, which is a cross-functional representative group that feeds directly into our business leaders' plan and action plan, and they kind of then sponsor some of the solutions that the team come up with, right? Because it's all well and good coming up with different engagement initiatives and things like that, but what's going to be, what's going to resonate, what's going to be most valuable, and I would be arrogant to think that I know all of the answers. So that's why we kind of engage, members of the team across the business to be able to.
I think that's really important because I think when people think about employee engagement, they try and sometimes go too over the top and think of something that's that engaging that it's actually touching on the word engagement rather than employee engagement. And it's like, actually the reason that we want to engage is the reason that they want to work there, what their culture is, their values, and then you have to resonate that with the engagement part. And I think sometimes that can get lost because people are trying to engage too much that they actually lose out on the reason why they're wanting to engage. So I think that's really important. And I guess what would be that first critical step for then engaging somebody?
Yeah, I think you've hit a really good point there. A lot of companies and people focus on the how and not the why. So focusing in on why are we doing this? What are we trying to achieve from it? And then work backwards from that, rather than what are the tools, the ways, the methods that we are going to be able to try to engage employees. I think the first step in kind of enable employee engagement is getting leadership buy-in. I think is a key one. So making sure that the company, the leadership team, that kind of stuff, are willing to dedicate some time and energy towards that. Because if you don't have that, very, very quickly drops down to the bottom of everyone's list, realistically. You know what I mean? When there's other commercial constraints, commercial constraints as well, I think, later on. But if you haven't got that, it's really going to fail pretty quickly, I think, because you're just not going to have that backing, really. Once you've got that foundation there, it's about building trust through consistent action and just iterating those small changes, making sure that you get things out there. They don't have to be perfect. You iterate on them, you take feedback on them, you make sure that you are working towards the bigger purpose, really. But I think a lot of people want all of the information up front, and that's like paralysis by analysis, and they need all of the information stuff. Sometimes you just need to get things started. So start small is the key message, I think, for that.
I think starting small is key, and as you mentioned as well, consistency, because you can have like an incentive that helps people, like, for example, the cycle to work scheme. If no one's using them out, it's not shouted about, you can't see it actually put in into action, then people aren't going to want to use these incentives, and they're sort of like pushed back. So I think if you want to start like a new thing that will actually be consistent and help people, you need to be pushing it out there and creating a message that is heard by the employees in different ways as well. Because I think people have to realize that if you are going to start something, people, like employees, react in different ways. So whether that's through like a newsletter or an email or a Slack message, or it's in a daily meeting, I think the way that you're doing it has to be consistent, but in different ways, so that people are hearing those new initiatives. I think that's really important, and definitely starting small, because you don't just want to get one piece of advice from an employee and then create this whole massive new thing, and actually you've interpreted it the exact wrong way. So starting small and then building out those the feedback to make something that's actually representative of what the feedback form has brought back, I guess.
No, you bang on there. You hit on a point that I didn't really cover as part of that, was around validation. So if someone wants something, say cycle to work scheme, and if they're the only employee in the company that want to, is that where the time and effort you've got to help come up with what's going to have maximum impact, maximum value. If you're going to be spending time on an initiative, you want to validate, is that going to be meaningful for a good proportion of employees? So I think that's a key one, being able to validate. If someone comes to you with an idea, having a way to be able to validate that with a cross section of the team, like a feedback form or something similar, is really, really useful.
Yeah, because you can see, I think it's important to see what is important to some people and is not important to other people. And I think sometimes you can tailor that to be for specific teams. Like the dev team might be completely different to the marketing team and in their needs and what they require, dependent on tools, hybrid working, remote working, collaboration tools. And I think it's, even though you have to prioritize certain things to make the business successful, I think you also have to prioritize individual needs as well. And I think it's really important. And that's why the feedback form is really good, because people can sit down and actually think what's important to me, rather than hearing like the CEO stand up and say, we've just brought in a 4-day working week. And it's like, well, no, actually, I work really well splitting my time across 5 days. I don't want to do that. So I think that's really important. And I think that's why like this type of form really does work. And I'd really like to know if you have like an example of something where an employee feedback has led to like a really significant improvement in your workplace, or something that you've really seen made a difference there.
I think probably there's obviously a number of examples, right? We've kind of done this for almost 2.5 years now. We've been on a journey with it, so there's really good wins from across each year. But I think the main standout one is we come up with a challenge and then try with a solution as part of feedback for to present back then to the business leaders function. One of them was around people were a little bit unsure around how they can progress. It wasn't as clear as it could be. We had a behavioural competency framework and stuff in place, but it was a little bit outdated. Didn't feel like it really resonated with the world that we were in, really being kind of modernised, updated in the past few years and stuff like that. So that was obviously a key way of being able to manage that, as well as through we run something called growth plans. So quarterly growth plan conversations then as well, to understand how they can stretch, how people can grow and develop within their roles, whether they just really want to own their skills and just do a really, really good job within their role, how they kind of progress within their role, but then what are the options for the next steps for them, and really kind of refining that process in a much better way, rather than like a traditional kind of process. So you're talking about kind of quarterly with set check-ins and things like that, to be able to keep people up to date on how they're progressing, get some feedback quicker than, because if you launch an annual appraisal, a year's a long time, right? So it's about almost structuring those conversations little and often, and given time and space to be able to have those kind of conversations, to keep it appraised, keep it updated with how they're getting on. So I think kind of those two things, we kind of launched our new behaviour toxicity framework, as well as an emphasis in the growth plans to make sure that people understand where they're up to and where they want to be going. That ties into career aspirations as well, be in or outside of the company. Where do they want to be long term, and then how do we then work on tangible steps over the next 18 to 24 months, or 12 to 24 months. What's the next step in getting into that longer term vision?
Yeah, definitely. And I think you covered two really good points there. I think firstly is that like people change throughout the year in what is important to them, and if they might hit a different milestones, for example, become pregnant or move location, or a partner might have lost a job, so their career aspirations in terms of money, flexibility, progression are going to change throughout that year. So it's really important to check in with employees to see how they might have changed, or they might want to drop down a level because they're feeling too pressurized. It's important to acknowledge at different milestones and check in there. I think that's a really important point. And then also making, as you said, these feedback forms and suggestions actionable. And I think that led on to my question that I was going to ask you, is how do you sort of move this feedback forward?
We decided it's not just about the feedback forum. The feedback forum is there to work with people around them, to harness their opinion, to kind of gather thoughts, feedback from people around them, but also give us their employee voice as part of that. Wanted to design it in such a way where it was there's something that we're trying to solve. And generally there's a bit more of a negative slant to some of the stuff, right? We're trying to fix things that could be better and trying to improve things. So generally there's a challenge statement, or there's a problem statement that we're trying to solve. And then what we'll then look to do is, between the feedback forum, is to try and come up with what do we think are the biggest initiatives, biggest things that we can do to move the dial positively in that way. Often some of the things you can't, it's not a one-stop shop. You can't just kind of nail them with one initiative. So we then take a solutions focused approach. So we get people to come up with all of the challenges in one session. It's really kind of like a ideas workshop that we do, and then we flip it then into another workshop. It's pure, let's go into creative, let's go into a positive solutions focused mindset to then come up with what are the answers. That then creates almost like a bit of an action plan there that the group put forward to the business leaders team. And the business leaders then take ownership of and feedback on which areas that they're really going to prioritize and focus on, because it might not be all of it. So there's then sponsorship from leadership to make sure that they are kind of signing it off, but also agreeing to take some of it forward. Some of it the feedback forum take forward, but the vast majority sits within the business leaders who are heads of departments and manage our teams, to make sure that these initiatives are spread across the company effectively. So it's not all down to the feedback forum. That's how we feed back into business leaders.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, as you said there, it's about engaging those leaders as well. I think employee engagement is about the employees, but also about the leaders as well, because if the leaders aren't engaged within the employee engagement program or however it's going to work, then if they don't buy into it, then it's not going to be reciprocated down to the employees. And if they don't believe in a certain action that's getting taken place, then they're not going to push that forward. So that's really important that they sit down and say, oh, for our team or for the company, I think it's good to prioritize this, this, and this, because this will move this, this, and this forward. And it's all about like creating as I said, successful business. Because if somebody isn't feeling like appreciated at work, they won't feel like they can be productive at work, which doesn't create a successful business if no one's being productive. So I think it's important to acknowledge that the leaders also have to be ingrained in that upcoming action, rather than them just taking the side step and it just being the HR leaders. Because if the HR leaders aren't bringing in different leaderships, then they're never going to be able to sort of cross-functionally realize, oh, actually our team would prefer that, or our team would prefer that. I think that's really, really important. So we spoke about the sort of actionable feedback there, so moving that forward. But when if you're looking at something in terms of you've got feedback, but then you've also got the recognition side of things, what does that look like for you, like recognizing employees, creating a meaningful recognition program, or just pushing that feedback forward? What does that look like?
The two main kind of things that come to mind with it, it's about firstly visibility, getting it out there, kind of making it known. We're also a little bit about kind of storytelling, and I don't mean storytelling in a fictitious way. I mean talking about reasons why and giving context, background, and stuff like that. So we run something called the Extra Mile Awards, which is a quarterly award nomination, if you like. And we don't just say, here are the 2-3 Extra Mile Award winners for this quarter. And we explain why they were nominated, how they went above and beyond, and which values that they kind of evidenced as part of it. We link it back to our values. And that, I think, gives people a lot more meaning behind that recognition, because it allows everyone to see what good looks like. It also gives actionable evidence and tangible examples of when they've done that. So it gives it a lot more credibility, really, and it stops it becoming a round robin of an award where you've got employee of the month, superstar of the month, whatever that looks like, and it just generally either goes to the most popular people, or for those who it just carousels around, because kind of people that kind of feel a bit sorry for someone who hasn't got it for a while and stuff like that. So it really it digs a lot deeper than that. Now, it does mean that people have to come with tangible examples and actionable evidence, and really sit down and think about the nominations that they're putting forward, which can be a bit of a battle for people, right? Especially when people are busy. But actually, we've not kind of budged on that, because we really need that. And something else that we kind of do as part of that, we get an independent panel together to be able to assess the nominees. What we found is that there is no great way of grading it 1 through 10, because all of the examples are very different, right? So we try and come up with a kind of a bit of a framework to work through, but there are still people at the forefront of it. So at the end of each quarter, we've got the nominations in. I can just facilitate and give a bit of continuity. But then what we do is we have around about 3 people who haven't nominated or been nominated themselves, so they have no kind of bias or skin in the game. And we kind of work through, in a bit of a workshop style way, work through all the nominations, kind of discuss, debate, vote, all that kind of stuff, and come up with the up to 3 kind of most the best examples of going the extra mile as well. So we found that is probably the best way so far of being able to make it a bit more of a meaningful approach to it, rather than just coming up with a 1 to 10 on these categories and then that's it. It's hard to be that objective about stuff when you compare really great examples and powerful examples of where people have gone above and beyond, but they're very different. And also what we've typically done is as well, we've steered away from it not being like people putting in extra hours and stuff. So we don't want it to be who works the longest. And we've kind of actively gone the other way on that, really. On occasion where if it's that alone, then we don't want to praise and recognise. We don't want to kind of incentivise that, if you like, through the extra mile award. Obviously, we'll work with that person individually, but we don't want it to be a who works the longest award. Going the extra mile doesn't mean working the most hours.
Yeah, exactly. I think you covered some really good points there. And one question I also wanted to ask is that can you, or would you maybe put this forward as like, can you vote for yourself for this award? Or
I don't think anyone has. I don't see why not. You've got great examples, right? We've not had that. Maybe we've just got really kind of like humble people in there, but yeah, we've not needed to think of that. But I suppose if you've got really good examples,
but I guess
it's a tough one, isn't it? Because you want it to be, it's a peer-to-peer recognition. So I would probably say maybe not, unless you can pull in people who can verify the examples.
Yeah, and I guess if it was maybe your manager and you've done a big project and they've seen the results, I guess that's where they will pull it in.
You can have a conversation
for you.
Typically people who've been close to that will see the work and effort and will put that in. Well, and also we do, not just with the extra mile, like we do like monthly shout outs and stuff as well. So for anything that's not kind of, really truly going above and beyond in that kind of extra mile, but where someone's really just helped you out on occasion, where it's within their role, but they've done it in a really nice way and it's really helped out, or someone's been really useful, really welcome and friendly and stuff like that. We do have our monthly shout outs as well for, I suppose, kind of like smaller examples of kindness, about working together well.
Yeah, I think also what I was going to say is that the framework element as well, because I think it's difficult to define what going the extra mile is, and I think it's very individual employee based, because depending on what their job description is, how they're achieving that, or maybe if an employee comes in and what their 30, 60 and 90 achievements are, if they're not achieving that, but they've done something that's gone the extra mile, it's sometimes hard to balance that. It's like, well, they haven't actually done any of their daily tasks, but they've done something that's gone an extra mile. So I think maybe having that framework that evaluates all of that as well, but then also making sure they don't go overly over the hours to make sure they're completing everything. I think it's like a really good balance of being able to see where that individual is at.
And I think that's kind of part of my role as a facilitator as part of it, because for certain roles, because they're working in different parts of the business and stuff, you may not know exactly what is that just a normal thing? Is that the expectation of that person? Is that just them doing a good job but within their role, and is that going extra mile? And I think because obviously I know and speak to and write job descriptions for everyone across the business, I can kind of help with some of that stuff, even though I'm not going to say either way, because I don't get a say in a vote and stuff like that, but I can kind of give some kind of information to be able to help that decision making process, if you like. So
yeah, it's important that I think HR leaders like yourself, when they are writing those job descriptions, they're truly understanding what that team does. I spoke to someone a couple of weeks ago, and they mentioned about having like sitting down in that team and truly understanding that team. And I think that works, because then when you're in that extra mile award discussion, then you can actually know what was on their job description and what they're actually working on and what's actually worked. So I think that's really good that you're thoroughly understanding the job description and what they do when you're sort of looking at that recognition side of things, because also you might be picking up on something that maybe their manager hasn't, because as like a sort of outside person that's seen their job description, you're like, well, actually that wasn't on their job description. They've just completely made up this new, better way of working. And actually that's improved the speed of that process by 3% or something. So without you knowing as sort of like that, like overseeing job description of that person, I think that really does help to see and pull in that end goal of what they've achieved. So yeah, I think that's really important. And so Just also touched about this extra mile award then. Have you seen like an impact of this award in sort of engagement and morale?
Yeah, so it's always one of those things where people kind of often when they get it, and so we do it in a few different ways. We'll announce it in newsletters. We do so you don't really get to see people's reactions and stuff. But normally, some of the feedback that we've had is kind of people have then kind of congratulated them and stuff like that, above and beyond the company line and the message and stuff. And that has been really, really good because, given that visibility across the company, people then get behind it and go, well done for that. I actually noticed that, or that had an impact on something that I was doing. So thanks for that. I'm really glad that you got the award, kind of thing. So, it's not just the company line and the person who's nominated them. They generally tend to get other people around them that are kind of praising them as well. So that's obviously a bit of a feel good for them. So they're getting that external verification too, which is great. And a lot of people, we do that through the newsletters when we announce that. We've also got our winter conference and in Manchester and flew out to Prague. But when we do the in-person events, everyone feels that you can kind of tell that they're a little bit tense and feel a little bit awkward, but afterwards you can see the smile on the face and how kind of proud they are, and they've got the kind of award, or the kind of it's visible and on the not the impact that it's had, but kind of how much they appreciate it. Although when you do the face to face, everyone feels a little bit going up there and stuff. So
Yeah, I think it's a good balance as well, especially in like a remote or hybrid environment, depending on what that a notification looks like in the newsletter, or whether it is like a big sort of end of year award. Then I think it's those little achievements that everyone gets. I do think everyone loves them, especially when you're working from home. If you get something, you can run into the next room and tell your partner, oh, I've just got a shout out on Slack. And you do feel dead happy with yourself because you're like, I've actually done a piece of work that someone's actually appreciated and looked beyond their own job and appreciated that, because I think people get stuck in their own job. They think that people aren't going to see that they're actually trying harder than like they're meant to be trying, if you get what I mean. So I think that's really important, because if you're getting recognized, it means that someone outside of their own work bubble has actually realized that you've impacted their bubble. And I think it's that being able to recognize that as a person. Oh, they actually gave me 2 sales leads last week, and that means that I've now got 2 more deals, but without them, I wouldn't have done that. So they've recognized that. And I think that's really important, like recognizing outside of your own sort of work bubble. And it shows people do enjoy it. People enjoy recognition, because without recognition, you then don't want to maybe push forward to career progress. You don't want to maybe look for that next senior, that manager role, because if you don't feel like you're progressing yourself, then you may not feel like you're appreciated in the business.
definitely, and I've had like family members and friends and stuff kind of talk about when they've had shout outs in other companies and stuff. So the fact that it kind of ripples out to their family and friends and social groups and stuff like that. Because people are, even though again sometimes people feel a bit awkward at the start, once they're being recognised for it, they kind of feel quite proud of that, and they should do. And that's what it's all about, right? It's about recognising great work, and it's that feel good moment, that your validation that I'm doing a really good job, and you feel a lot more comfortable with it, stuff like that. Really. So yeah, it's that's exactly the thing that it's trying to achieve. And you kind of want people to be talking at a barbecue with the friends that they've recently received an extra mile award, and shouting about it as well.
So we've done the feedback, we've gave some recognition. So how do you actually measure that what you're doing and the actions you're taking are actually making a change, or that the change is actually working?
So again, kind of find feedback really, but we do not just with the feedback forum themselves, but it's obviously pulse surveys. So we do pulse survey, quarterly pulse surveys. We do EMPS on a monthly basis. So we kind of try and capture as much of that in a couple of different ways, really, to make sure that we're seeing kind of the numbers improve. Typically, obviously, we'll have the NPS as an example. We typically try and put some kind of numbers on some of the surveys, so like sliding scales and things like that. But so we measure it in a few different ways. We're actually kind of evolving how we do that now as well. So the difficulty is obviously we're not kind of standardizing that. So that can be a bit of a challenge when you're measuring stuff. You kind of need a real consistent approach to that measurement to kind of track it long term. But we've got like a version 2 now that we're launching, again, based on some feedback. I think now we need to run that for the next 12 to 24 months at least to make sure that we've got that consistent baseline and that consistent way of being able to measure impact that it's having really. And then you will just get kind of anecdotal stuff, and then we'll also see through the quality of the quality and volume of extra mile moving forward. That's a really good one, and we're seeing the quality is in terms of when we first started with it. Some of the examples are pretty vague and stuff, but we're getting a lot more descriptive, detailed stuff now as we go through that process. As people are shouting other people out, we're hearing about what kind of people, what kind of scenarios and examples people get for different awards, and actually is that something similar to what someone else is doing over here? So I think the quality and volume of that is a good measures as well, to be able to kind of see, well, are we getting not just more quantity on a quarterly basis, are we getting better quality? So yeah, and we're seeing them definitely improve.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that goes into, I was going to ask, I know with the sort of surveys and feedback, I think it's important for every business to change and develop. And I think the way the workplace has changed at the moment is much faster than back when you'd put a CV on a fax machine and you'd do all that. That was very slow paced, but now it's a lot more faster. And I think the constant surveys and feedback is very important for how fast the workplace is changing. But I do know that it's sometimes hard for employees to complete it as just another tick list or just another task to fill in, so they're not getting pestered by the HR leader or by their manager to fill it in. So I like the fact that you've touched on the fact that you're observing the quality and the quantity of those votes, because it means that people are actually becoming engaged. But is there any other ways that you make sure that it is just maybe not another task for someone to tick off, so that HR is off their back?
Yeah, so we've evolved it from last year, where we were doing kind of like really short monthly pulse surveys, EMPS is another pulse surveys, and they were kind of combined as to one. What we've done now is stripped out EMPS as just a one question survey, so it's literally just one click on a monthly basis to just get that kind of sense check on a month by month basis, and to get that consistency. And then what we've then done is we've gone out to quarterly surveys, which are a little bit more in depth than the monthlies, touching on different, and we've changed up the subjects and what we're focused on as part of that. Well, I think the main bit of feedback on what we're going to be doing this year that we didn't necessarily do a great job of last year, being really honest with you, was closing the loop. So it's sharing the information and insights more. So we're going to be doing that and explaining certain things of what we're doing in the background to try and overcome this, or in some cases where we might not be able to, or what is the kind of the feedback or the company view on X, Y, and Z, or what are we going to prioritize from that prioritization piece. So, and I think that kind of honesty builds kind of trust and keeps people participating because they know something's happening with it. Whereas a lot of the stuff that we were trying to do previously was kind of work on it in the background. But I think making sure that the surveys results, some of the key parts of it, we can kind of share in the newsletters and share in our kind of internal comms piece, and then being able to close that feedback loop on what are we doing to move the diary in certain areas as well. I think that allows it to be more meaningful, and people then kind of, because if you don't see it, right, if you're just submitting something and you don't really see any of the results and it's not visible and really kind of the dots are joined up, it might feel a little bit of change. if it's not really highlighted to you in that way, you can see why people over time just go, oh,
Yeah. And you can see it in like the results. I think if you're sat down after the results and you're talked through and you can see that other people felt the same way that you did, you're not just feeling like you're standing alone having these opinions, and you actually realize, oh, what I thought actually was reciprocated throughout the business. So that's actually going to mean that there's going to be positive change moving forward in that. So I think that's really important to like publicize those results, because then it means that then if there is a change, you've seen, oh, I actually said something, something's happened, so I'm definitely going to say something for the next time round because it could help again. So yeah, I think it's really important so that individuals can actually see that change, but also see what the change might be. So yeah, I think that really is important, and I guess that is what metrics you'll be measuring then. So when you are sort of assessing that employee engagement, what are those key metrics to knowing that an employee is engaged?
I think it is a tough one as well, isn't it? Because again, we've touched earlier on, it's going to be different for different people. People are going to evidence and showcase their engagement in different ways. I think it is really hard to get a standard measure really. But I think the main one for me is around participation. People are engaged, they're going to participate, they're going to come up with ideas, they're going to feedback on different things, they're going to put people forward, they're actually thinking about how they can kind of participate in the different initiatives, the different events, different things that you've got kind of on the go, feedback forum and stuff like that. You want a good level of participation throughout the company, because I think with the best will in the world, if you haven't got that, that's a real clear indication that you haven't got great engagement. People will often then they may just say, "Oh, I just want to do a good job. I don't want to do all of that other stuff." But that's a lack of engagement. Right? That's a lack of buy-in to what the company are trying to do. If the company are and the leadership team are backing it, then de facto it shouldn't necessarily be, I just want to do a good job. You want to get involved in all of these other things. So I think participation is a major one, and across all of the different forums that we kind of mentioned. I suppose recognition rates as well. So how many people are getting recognised and rewarded off the back of different things as well, because that will it's going to drive engagement, like we talked about before. People are going to get that sense of fulfillment, achievement, and be proud of the work they're doing as part of that. And then, we could look at people who are involved in growth plan conversations and the quality of those growth plan conversations. How engaged people do people actually spend time to write what their aspirations are in the next 5 to 10 years, or do they just kind of pay a little bit of lip service and then just focus in on the objectives that they're going to achieve and stuff as well? So it's trying to get that balance between participation and quality of that participation there are the two main factors.
Yeah, definitely. It's basically how connected they are to the company to be able to be committed to doing those things. And it's those two things which fuel how motivated, energized, wanting to work they are. And if they sort of work towards that, the culture and the values of the company, I think that sort of all ties it into, whether they are an engaged employee. So I guess I'd just love to do some like little advice, quick fire questions at the very end to summarize what we've gone through. And I think that'll be really perfect. But firstly, do you have some advice for, let's say, HR leaders who are early on in their employee journey? What would be maybe just that first initial thing to maybe get that started, or what piece of advice would you give someone just getting started in that journey?
The first bit of advice, and it's not necessarily an actionable one, so it's not like a tactical first step, because everyone could be different, and different companies are set up in different ways. I think the main bit of advice is try to understand what you want to prioritize, what's going to be highest value within your organization, within your teams, and really focusing on that. Because if you chase everything, you're going to finish nothing, really. You know what I mean? It's that kind of, you can do anything but not everything. So just really get clear and focused in on what your main kind of areas that you think you should focus in on, and get feedback on that. Engage the teams on what are the most important things to the teams to be able to move the dial, right? Who best to ask about how can we engage it, and the people that you're trying to engage. So I would do that and kind of focus in on the important parts that are going to have most value to your teams and ultimately the organisation as well. So that'd be the first one. Just try to focus in on the highest value.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because if you're prioritizing what's right, it means you're looking at the business goals. I think that's important for all leaders out there, is that they look back to the business goals of Q1, Q2, but also for the year, and say, well, does that prioritize with what we're trying to achieve? If we're trying to achieve 500 more employees, then that means that by having 2 more people in each team, that goes to that business goal. So I think it's important to go back to that business goal, but also, as you said as well, starting small and then getting bigger from that. Because if you're prioritizing something and you're working on it from the get-go, I think that's important to highlight as advice piece, that you don't have to start on the massive project straight away. Starting small is the best way to see and measure those outcomes. And if it's working better, you can sort of build on that. I think that's really important. And I really like that.
I think you've got to have an agile approach with it, because you could, some of these, big transformative initiatives and things like that, it might take you 6 to 12 months to launch. Behaviour and cognitive framework and stuff as an example, it might take you 6 to 12 months. And if you don't get it right, and you haven't done that validation, you haven't done, it might not quite be the right thing. You could have done a bit more to explore what that means, and to, it's ultimately, it's a lot of it can be wasted time, and you can get things not right, but focus on getting things out there, getting feedback on them, and then just improve them as you go. I think everyone's on that journey of learning throughout that process then. I mean, if you're honest with that, people don't mind that. People don't need things to be perfect straight away. You just need to see that as an improvement.
Exactly. I think starting something with like a 6 to 12 month project rate, and then realizing you also have to measure that after that. So it could be another 6 months. It's
Add a review in there. Add a review in, and be really quite objective, and don't try not to be too precious that it might be your initiative that you're leading on, and just taking the feedback for what it is, and then move it on, move it out.
I don't know. And so I've seen in some companies that they do sort of like a trial run with a randomly generated employees from different teams, age groups, ethnicities, backgrounds, just trials, like a new upcoming program or something, to see if it works with just a select few. And then that way, if it works, or maybe there was a little bit of, oh, I'm not sure about this, you can then go back to the drawing board, introduce it to maybe another random group. And then that way you try them, that rather than opening it up to the whole business and it completely fails and you've just spent, and it's been very non-cost effective, and you've just suddenly now everyone's got this thing that doesn't even work. So yeah, I think that's really important. And then, so let's get into those quick fire questions to finish us up then, Mike. So what is one thing that every HR leader should stop doing when it comes to employee engagement?
So I think it ties into what we've discussed before, but stop trying to do everything. So starts with validation of is that thing that person's discussed or kind of come forward with, validate is that the right thing, and be honest with, you can't do everything. So just really focusing. So it kind of ties into the last thing that we talked about, but you don't have to do everything. Just because if you're asking for feedback, you don't have to act on all of it. So don't feel that pressure. Again, just be honest with it, because you can with the teams.
Definitely. And then what is one recognition tactic that's a must for modern workplaces?
I think normalising kind of peer-to-peer recognition. Normalise that. I don't know, it's probably a little bit more of a kind of a British thing, but we're uncomfortable with receiving good feedback, compliments and stuff, and we're just not great at it. And then in turn, we don't give an awful lot as well. So I think just providing that environment to normalise peer-to-peer recognition, I think that is the biggest, most tactical thing that you can do. So just start shouting about stuff and make sure that people are aware that they can shout about the people and the great things that we've been doing. So it's when peers, when people, colleagues celebrate each other, it just becomes part of the culture.
Yeah, no, I know. I read something recently and it was if you think that you want to give that person a compliment, give them a compliment because that will make their day. It says like if you can give up to 3 compliments a day, you've made 3 people's day much better because of something that you've thought. And even if it's, oh, I like your top, or oh, thanks for this blog, it was really helpful. Like from a professional or a career point of view, I think it's really important. And it's definitely in the British culture that we steer away from that. But everyone loves a compliment, don't they?
And selfishly, I think everyone gets a little bit of a dopamine hit off giving a compliment as well, especially when it's received really there. And so it not just impacts the individual, it's kind of from a selfish perspective, actually it impacts us as well. So I think it's, if you can drive that and that becomes more of a normal kind of, maybe not day to day, but certainly kind of week to week routine, everyone's going to feel.
Especially if you're the one that's nominated the person for that extra mile awards and you've seen that actually what you've done has got someone to that point. I think that's really important. So I guess moving on, what does the extra mile mean to you personally?
And again, we touched on what it doesn't mean is working long hours. So I think I just want to caveat that. But I think what it means to me personally, we have got a bit of a statement. I'm not going to read off that because I want to make it personal to me, right? But it means kind of stepping into something or stepping up to something that might not necessarily be your responsibility, but you're doing it because you care. I think it's doing the right thing, but even if no one's watching, and obviously that counteracts. I think people are always watching and taking note, and obviously that's how we get the extra mile award nominated. But I think if you're doing the right thing, even though no one's watching, and kind of lifting ones up along the way, I think all of those things really is what the extra mile is.
Definitely. I think that's really perfect summary of those 3 quick fire are exactly what we've sort of summarised throughout. I think that really works well as what we've discussed today. So thank you so much for joining us today, Mike. It's honestly been really great episode, sharing all your insights from reinventing, recognition, feedback and engagement. So if you are a HR leader looking for new ways to engage your teams, we hope you found this episode really helpful. It's really good to delve into those different ways of engaging employees, especially in the modern workplace. But be sure to subscribe, leave a review and tune in for the next episode of different stories and strategies to building those stronger teams. Thanks, everyone. Bye.